time to introduce you to your first speaker of the night. Up first, we are going to introduce you to Dean Wickliffe. He is one of New Zealand's longest serving people to be held in prison, with a wealth of knowledge of the system by virtue of having lived and survived 44 years in prison and able to speak to the real experiences of the justice system. I would like to introduce Dean Wickliffe.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I've been involved with the corrections and the criminal justice system now for 60 years, 44 of those years as a prisoner. My journey through the penal system began when I was 17 years old in Youth Detention Centre, Waikeria. And I have to say that I can't say that there was anything in that institution that I experienced that propelled me down the road I took, other than the fact that I refused to point blank to salute my guards and call them sir, which was required. And if you didn't do it, you were charged and put in the pound. And that was my introduction to youth detention. There were several visits to the pound for refusing to acknowledge them in the way they wanted to, which I thought was quite ridiculous. Youth detention was a 60s version of boot camp. It was based on military discipline. And the military discipline we got was we had to salute our guards, call them sir, and be marched around like imitation soldiers, which I objected to. And it was that point that I think it was the start of my whole life that I started to challenge the system. I wasn't going to allow myself to be humiliated. I was only 17, but I still had I felt I was still a man. I thought I was a man at that stage, and I didn't feel I should be treated like in a way that I felt was offensive. But there was a total lack of rehabilitation there, and that's a keynote, I have to say, in every experience I've had in every institution I've been around. And I still haven't been through a rehabilitation program today. I'm 75 years old, was 60 years within the system. And there's something wrong with the thinking of people who think that punishment can make better persons of you. And I want to elaborate a little on that a bit later in the kōrero, because you also need to know not only about what happens to youth when they go down the wrong road, you need to know what happens to them later and how they come out at the other end, because I'm a product of that system. I've been there for 44 years of my life. I got out of there on New Year's Eve, 1965. They gave me £1 10 shillings, which is equivalent of about $3 to start my life. I had no clothing other than what I wore to court, was a pair of jeans, t-shirt and sand shoes. I had nowhere to live. I had no support. And it's not surprising that 3 months after getting out, I was arrested for burglary of a bowling club, looking for money and things to sell for money because I had nothing to eat. And I was sentenced to 2 years Borstal. Now, Borstal was where it really happened for me, down that wrong road. Borstal was a 2-year extension of the youth detention system. The same rules applied. If you didn't salute, you didn't march around like they wanted you to. If you didn't call them sir, they'd throw you in a pound. And I want to describe what the pound was about. because I spent a lot of time there, and in the years to come I would spend years in the pound, locked up 23 hours a day. I'd tell them to stick their hour a day up their arse, and I did it to hard. I told them I didn't want nothing, and I'll tell you a little bit about that story a little later. But this is where it started for me, and in the pound it was condemned later by the health department as unfit for use. There was a hole in the roof of our cells as an air vent, a small hole. We couldn't get out of it, but the rain could come in and run down our walls, cover our floors. During the day, our mattress were taken and blanket was taken off us. We only got one blanket, even in midwinter. It was very cold. They took our blankets and mattress off us at 7 a.m, returned it at 5 p.m. You could be sentenced up to 28 days at a time, but that wasn't so much an issue for me. You can adjust to that. But there was also food restrictions. In those days, they punished you by restricting your food rations. So they could sentence you up to 28 days. Number one diet consisted of 4 or 5 potatoes, boiled potatoes, no salt, no hot drink. You got about a pint or 1.5 pints of milk. You got 6 slices of dry bread, no butter. You got a lump of fat to put on it for your butter. And that was it for up to 28 days at a time. And I did quite a few months of 28-day number one diets in the Borstal. And they were trying to intimidate me, cower me into submission. It had the exact opposite effect. And this is what they never got to learn throughout my history, where I spent 30 years in solitary confinement, trying to break me, trying to bend me to their will. But they don't realise it makes you stronger. It makes you fight back. It also makes you realise that there's issues here that are worth fighting for. But I left the Borstal already thinking about the crime I was going to commit the next time I got out. I was thinking about bank robbery. And I'd went and robbed a bank within 12 months of getting out at gunpoint. I was 19 years old. I got sentenced to 7 years in prison. I was placed in D block, the top security wing at Paremoremo Prison. I didn't realise it, but I was to spend 28 years there over the next 30 years in 4 different prison terms there. And we were locked up 22, 23 hours a day. Depends on what era we're talking about. The first 10 years of the 70s, it was 23-hour day lockup. The way I responded, stick your hour a day up your ass. I don't want nothing from there. And that's why I did it for 30 years. But when men start dying, start committing suicide, you got to get real. We had 5 or 6 suicides in a short space of time. A number of other inmates broke under the pressure of being locked up around the clock. They were sent to mental institutions. Some of them committed suicide there. And this so angered me. We had all these tough guys there. They only didn't know how to communicate other than with the fists. And so that's how they came out of their cells fighting. And of course the guards are just as tough. A lot of them from the military and the police, ex-SAs. And there was a war going on. And we rioted in 1970 and took 7 officers hostage at knife point to try and get force about changes, which didn't come. They did come, but they came tougher and harder. And that's when the suicides started and the mental breakdowns. And we had to do something. And violence wasn't the way I could see. It was counterproductive. We needed to have someone who could kōrero with them. And so I took on that role after one strike or prop where 4 of us barricaded in after one of the prisoners got racially abused by a newly recruited officer from England who called him a nigger. When you tell a man in D block that, you got a problem. And so I had to go to the superintendent, tell him that if he's not removed, he's going to be assaulted by the rest of us. So he was removed, but the superintendent told me that because I was at this time organising strikes amongst the prisoners, I united the gangs and the prisoners on, and I told them we have to stand together if we're going to get change. And we did. And I was the one that was the voice for the prisoners in D block for all the last 25 years of the 30 years I spent there. 28 years I spent there. And over time, we did gain concessions. And but before that occurred, there was too many men who died. And when I got out after my first sentence, I went public to the media, to the Parliament, to the Ombudsman, and a major investigation resulted in the change of prison superintendent, and who attempted to make changes that the prison staff weren't willing to cooperate with. And so it took another 10 years after that before we started to get any progress, but eventually we got progress. And I'd just like to say that I've never been rehabilitated through the system, but I've had to deal with a lot of things people don't understand. That I want to tell you that I'm a product of this. So this is what happens when things go wrong at the Youth Detention Centre. We're essentially talking about punishment, whether it's youth institutions or adult institutions or maximum security institutions. Punishment does not work. And most of the guys who were in there with me had come from Borstal Youth Detention, and some of us, myself included, from child welfare before that. And nothing is being done to change the system when all the evidence will tell you that it doesn't work. So that's what actually motivated me. I had more reason than that, of course, but I found myself fighting for justice, I felt I was on the right side. And so the more they punished me, the stronger I became, because I had a code I was living by, and all the evidence was around me that the system was failing. And no one, other than Mr. Kim Workman here, was listening in the corrections department. Even now, unfortunately, he's not still there. I wish he was. But my head of my kōrero has come here. There's a lot more I could say, but in the adult system, prison system, but you really have to look at the way children are being dealt with. And I've seen when teenagers jump on the roof and protest, there's already a problem there. It's already too late. Those guys are going to go down that same road with me. They're going to end up in gangs, or they're going to end up like me on murder charges, bank robbery charges. And that's the life I lived as an outlaw with my own rules. And I said, fuck the world, the way you treated me wasn't right. And I was a victim of a serious injustice, which I don't have time to tell you here. And I wrote a book about it called A Lifetime Behind Bars. Unfortunately, I've sold out. And if I had any, I would give each of you one to read, because you really need to hear it. Read it, because this is what it's all about. And I'm the end product of the system that went wrong. But in my own way, I think I've come through the other end reasonably well. A lot of others didn't survive. Kia ora.